This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/into the portal.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay.
And we're back with another Film Friday.
Yes, we are. Welcome, everybody.
Another week has come and passed, and this Friday we are discussing none other than the cult classic, Donnie Darko.
Yeah, I love this movie.
Yes, it's a 2001. Actually, director's cut came out in 2004, which is... Well, actually, some people, I don't know, it's kind of 50-50 split. Some people really love the theatrical because it doesn't give you all the explanations, kind of leaves it up to your imagination, while the director's cut sheds some light on a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, this is a very fun movie. We've seen this movie so many times, right? And
yeah, definitely. And it's fun because it's accessible to more people than maybe the other three movies that we have talked about so far in our Film Fridays. It's a little bit more of a suitable for all ages type of movie. I wouldn't say all ages, but more so than Hereditary, let's just say that.
Yeah, it's not going to give you nightmares, I would hope.
It's more just fascinating, just genuinely fascinating, the themes that I touch on in this
fascinating,
movie.
Confusing for
sure.
To some degree, for some people, especially the first time you see it. Yeah, there's always new things I kind of pick up on, like little subtle nuances.
This is one of those movies you have to watch it more than 1, 2, 3, 4 times because there is it's one of those ones where the sequences are weird, right? So you pick up on so much more.
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna start off with a little brief synopsis here.
Sure.
The director was Richard Kelly, who wrote and directed this film.
Right.
He was he wasn't stubborn, but he was very young when he wrote this film. He wrote it in 28 days. The story takes place over 28 days, and it was actually filmed over 28 days, which is very interesting.
That's
typical of low-budget films. Mm-hmm. But this was one of his first works that was kind of like his introduction into Hollywood, which is kind of cool. And like I was reading some articles of what he had to say about the piece and everything, and the film itself, and how he wrote it, and then a lot of people were initially impressed in the director's spheres of Hollywood and all this stuff. And he got introduced to a lot of big wigs, including like Ben Stiller and a lot of people.
Okay.
And everyone loved it, but no one really wanted to touch it because they thought it would be too big of a budget, and it was a very ambitious story.
Right.
And so it initially died off, and then Jason Schwartzman kind of took up interest in it after about a year of it being dead. And he actually wanted to play Donnie. But then scheduling and all this stuff kind of came into play, and essentially they got Jake Gyllenhaal to do the role, and they got Drew Barrymore to fund most of it. Or she found the backers for it.
Right, she was kind of the name behind it, yeah.
So there's a lot of like really fun little weird trivia and a lot of like synchronicities that occur with this movie, which I thought was really fun. Definitely. And there's so many stars too. Like there's
stars and
Maggie
to be future
Gyllenhaal.
Stars for sure.
Yeah, like Seth Rogen. It was his first film.
Yeah.
First like major motion picture. Obviously it was in Freaks and Geeks before that.
Freaks and Geeks, yeah.
Who else do we got here?
I recognize the other sort of like bully
Swayze.
or whatever. Oh, of course, can't forget Swayze. And of course, that just makes me think of Trailer Park Boys and the good old the Swayze Express.
Yeah.
But interesting cast, really. When you think about it, if you did like a police lineup of who's in this movie, it's actually kind of funny, right?
There's a lot of names. Yeah. We get Beth Grant, who plays Kitty Farmer.
Oh my gosh. Least favorite character and most favorite character at the same time.
I think she's my favorite.
She's so funny. Oh my gosh.
It's so good.
We'll get into that in a sec, but like.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so lots of big names, lots of memorable characters. We'll get into all of our like favorite parts about each character and everything, but just for people who haven't seen the show, honestly, just go watch it before you even listen to this.
Well, definitely, because it's obviously spoilers abound, because that's what this episode is about. These Film Fridays, we just get right into them.
You've been warned.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the film, whatever, brief synopsis, essentially this takes place in the year 1988. Mm-hmm. 8 comes into play a lot for this film. But it's, during the presidential election, there's a teenager, his name is Donnie Darko, and he is known for sleepwalking. And essentially, he one night sleepwalks out of his house and sees this giant demonic-looking rabbit. I'm just paraphrasing from the Google synopsis.
Yeah.
Who basically tells him the world is going to end in 28 days.
Yes.
A lunar cycle.
Right.
When Donnie returns home, he finds that a jet engine, a mysterious, unknown jet engine belonging to a plane that seemingly has vanished into thin air, has crashed into his bedroom. Luckily, he's been saved.
Right.
So the question that they end this little synopsis off with, which is very telling, I really like this, says, is Donnie living in a parallel universe? Is he suffering from mental illness? Or will the world really end?
Right.
So I like that.
Yeah, it's left, and you're left, you're given this kind of question right at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it sets the stage for how bizarre this all is.
Exactly.
From Donnie's perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to, there's elements of it that remind me of movies almost like, the title is escaping me, but with Russell Crowe, where like A Beautiful Mind, where he's schizophrenic and things like that. And like where there's definitely elements of that where you think he very well could just have a mental illness.
Instability that kind of leads to a sort of, he's not a reliable reference point.
Potentially. But you find out very quickly that obviously what's happening is there's the grandma death and the very tangible, real things that start to fall into place for Donnie.
They seem to be falling into place from disparate corners of his world, of his reality, and in very strange ways.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, including like the writers, they've kind of gone on to reveal that basically the majority of this plot takes place in what's known as a tangent universe. And it's essentially created by this strange rift of like an opening, like a portal that's opened. And that's where essentially the plane engine comes from.
Right.
That belongs to the plane that Samantha and his mother Rose are actually traveling on at the end of the film, right? There's that turbulence and then they start going down and it's this whole, it's like the end of the world is actually happening.
Right.
But yeah, so they basically say that this takes place in a tangent universe, which goes far to explain a lot of the strange behaviors you see in the film displayed by various characters. One most notably that comes very early on is Drew Barrymore's character, where she's in the classroom and you get Gretchen Ross arriving, the new kid in town, and she has this very strange way of getting her to choose a spot to sit.
Right.
And even just the whole back and forth where Gretchen says, she's like, oh, well, I'm new here, but they put me in the wrong English class. Why would you say that? Like, you know what I mean? That seems weird. Like, she's just trying to rub it off and be like, oh, like, I'm not supposed to be here. Like, that to me is kind of telling,
well,
right?
It's almost like she said it that, like, she had to have a reason because Drew Barrymore's tone was very much like, can we help you? Like, what are you doing here? Which is also very much like a strange interaction before she's even, like, sit next to the boy you think is cutest. Mm-hmm. Right, and which is just so strange.
Which is very unprofessional and very, strange, right?
It's not even like, it's like...
Because she's meant... The way that I interpret it is like Gretchen is meant to sit beside Donnie because that has to come into play for him to actually do the things he needs to do to correct this sort of impending doom of the two universes collapsing in on one another.
Yeah, so, I mean, okay, so Frank tells him that, 28 days, X amount of hours, minutes, and seconds... And the world's gonna end. He doesn't really believe him right away. He's not sure of himself, right? Yeah. And then he's sitting and he's going to therapy. So he's sitting. This is the recurring scene throughout the movie where he's sitting with his therapist. I can't remember her name.
Dr. Thurman.
Dr. Thurman, and she really provokes it. Right, like she like going the hypnosis that he does. I guess a little bit later on, she really brings it out. I mean, she obviously has a big major role in him. The little breadcrumb trail of him. She doesn't know that she's a part of it, though.
Well, she does. That's where you kind of are questioning, right? Like, are these people basically like pawns from some sort of higher spectral entity or power that's kind of ultimately pulling the strings of this whole plot, right? Of this whole scenario where Donnie's going down this series of events where ultimately either he chooses to die in the end and correct this sort of impending collapse.
Right.
Or if he doesn't, then essentially the world will end, is kind of the whole premise. But you're right, though. She has such a big part, Dr. Thurman, in sort of unveiling this sort of subconscious reality for him. And maybe even further solidifying it, because you do get this sort of divide between the real world, the living world, and then the dream world that Donnie goes to quite a bit. Yeah. And she tries to explain that to his parents. It's like, oh, he's increasingly detached from reality. But it's like, is he though? Or is he actually getting back to... Or is he getting notes or like little, I don't even know, like little bits coming from the other side that's kind of directing him and telling him how to go about it.
Totally. And I guess what she means by too, it's like it's their reality. The reality that he's living is one in which he's essentially a chosen one in a way.
He's the living recipient is how they refer to him.
And so he can see things other people can't see.
Right.
And that is this perception of what he ends up describing when he's having those conversations with his science teacher as like God's path.
God's channel.
God's channel. Mm-hmm. And there's no religious context to this at all. It's literally just like implying that like a predetermined time frame, like a predetermined history in a sense, right? And we get the visualization of that, which I think is so interesting with the tunnels, the tunnels coming out of people's chests and stomachs. Mm-hmm. That's almost like these. I mean, like it's them, right? It's them. It's like this,
and it only goes so far, right? Because it almost seems as if there is the potential where they could maybe go left or right at this particular point,
right?
But they don't. And just to add to that thought, the idea that it is all predetermined and that everything that he's doing is exactly laid out. The breadcrumbs are all there for him to kind of pick up as he goes. But yeah, what's really telling about that exact scene where he starts to see the visualization of it basically beckons to him. And it has that big, like literally it's like a finger being like, come with me.
Yeah, almost.
Beckons him forward. He follows it. And what does he uncover? The gun. So that again is a huge piece to the puzzle, right? Of what eventually he needs to do.
Yeah.
In order to, kind of, correct the imbalance or however. Like the thing for me that's weird to think about is like, how did this actually come into play in the beginning? Like why him? Why then and there? And then we also get reference from Eddie, his father, that this has actually happened before.
Right? With somebody that they knew
with
from
someone
high school.
That his parents, exactly, his parents knew, and he basically says after this whole thing happens and they're laying on the bed together in the hotel room, him and his wife Rose, and they're just like kind of like watching the election stuff, the updates and stuff, and then he just says like, that could have been Donnie, essentially, like, remember that guy from high school? He died right before grad, and he said he was doomed. Yeah. Like, that is so crazy to me. So, like, Donnie isn't, like, special per se, but he is elevated to a certain extent.
But then that makes you question whether or not, it's like assuming that was, like, the same circumstance, or if that was just a coincidence, like the guy said he was doomed or whatever. Obviously, the world didn't end for that, after that
But
happened,
the world didn't end because he died.
Because he cycled back around the same way Donnie did. Like, doesn't die the first time, figures it out, goes back, corrects it.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
So then it's like just like a loop.
And that's another little weird tidbit, too, where it's like everyone involved in this story and this plot line, like, is aware, but not. It's like deja vu. It's like they have this feeling, this sense that that this has happened to them before, that they've seen something before, that this is all right. Especially
the very end scene, right? That's where we see all that.
Right. And you get it from, and the most telling one is the doctor, when she sits up in bed.
Oh,
and she's like looking around as if like she can feel like Donnie just got crushed by a jet engine.
Definitely.
As if she had already dealt with all this before.
Yeah, she's already in tune with it. And obviously Frank, too, is very telling because he puts his hand up to his eye, and that's like one of the very last things you see in that whole Mad World sort of...
We've got some questions we want to ask each other, I think. We want to get into some of like the character stuff and like a few of those types of things.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's so much to get off. Yeah.
And then maybe
we kind of just went right into this whole
I know, like
tangent universe. But just on that note, because I'm not really fully finished with that one.
Keep going.
But it's very interesting, right? Because what we've been saying is essentially, characters throughout this film say and do things that do not make sense in our normal world that push Donnie to do what he needs to do, like we've said. We see that or another really telling one is with his science teacher, when his science teacher, he's having that little conversation, a little back and forth, and then he has the book right in his hand, the time travel book, and he just gives it to him. And that to me is very weird. It's like, first of all, why would you have that? Why would you be laying out that breadcrumb, that trail of grandma death and all this stuff for Donnie? It's like, it's all so intentional.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's just a side note. But again, like this is a quote here. It says, "One question that Donnie's role as the living receiver presents is whether or not it's possible that he is actually from the primary universe. There are some mythologies that equate sleepwalking with passing through or traveling to other dimensions."
Yeah.
So, like, just to discuss that, like, what are your thoughts on that statement?
I find that absolutely fascinating, and the reason is because we know so little about sleep. That's one of the. I mean, we know very little about the human brain still, but that's one of the major frontiers of us that we do not understand, and that is totally fascinating to me. I think like. I don't even know. There's a lot to unpack with that. I'm not sure.
Well, even just that first part there, where it's like his role as a living receiver presents the question of whether or not it's possible he is from the primary universe. For me, that's kind of redundant, because without him being in the primary universe, there would be no function for him in the tangent universe, because he wouldn't exist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there would be no... And then there would, again, you can reverse that and say there's no function for him in the primary universe then, because he is the person that ultimately corrects this sort of imbalance that leads to this impending doom.
Right.
So that to me is kind of like... I just came across that as in one of the articles I was reading through, and I was like, I think that's a weird question to pose a little bit, but I wanted to throw it out to you just to see.
Well, it's actually... I need to go back and reread Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and they reference that book in this movie. He, like, busts it out when he's trying to explain time travel, the science teacher, to Donnie. And
that's where you get the reference to the DeLorean. Which is the 88
epic.
miles per hour, which 88 again comes up all the
Turn it on
time.
its side, and what do you get?
Should be infinity symbol.
You get the infinity symbol.
Which is also interesting, too, because right before we sat down to record this episode, Andrew went on Audio Boom, pulled up our numbers for, like, our all-time whatever listens.
Yeah.
And it was what, Andrew?
We were at 88,800.
That's so
like,
effing weird.
Triple eight. And
that's so strange.
Yeah, it's kind of serendipitous. We're
Year
doing Donnie
takes place
Darko.
1988, all these references to 88
Yeah.
being, like, the time-traveling number. It's, like, the magic number.
Total random side note, but do you think that has anything to do with the reason behind the title of 28 Days Later? Lunar cycle?
28 days later. Oh, that's a
Horror
good
movie?
question.
I don't think they really played that into that plot, but anyway. Just
I feel like
made
we
me
could
think
definitely
of
go
that.
down that road a little bit with that one.
For sure. Can you re-ask me that question that you just asked me again? Because I feel like I...
Okay, so essentially what they're trying to say is that it's questionable whether or not Donnie exists, because there's these two worlds, right? There's the primary universe and there's this tangent universe that kind of sprouts up as a result of some sort of weird wormhole that was opened up that the plane engine falls through.
Right.
So essentially when that happens, this tangent universe is kind of like either it already existed, always existed, and is just butted up against this primary universe in some way or shape or form.
Okay.
But essentially what they were trying to say is that it presents this question. His role as a living receiver presents the question of whether or not he is actually from the primary universe.
Right, or if he's just sort of something that's been interjected as a
But that doesn't make any sense
as a
to me.
vessel for correcting time or something.
Well,
right?
exactly, right? Like, that doesn't make sense to me because they're so... It's very obvious, right? Because by the end of the movie, we're back to the primary universe, and obviously his entire family's in mourning of him, and he's gone, he's dead. It's not like he never existed.
Right.
It's not like everyone's living their happy little lives, and it's just a family of 4 instead of a family of 5, you know? So that to me was just kind of like, I was like, what? Like, people actually kind of think that or argue that? I just thought it was weird.
Yeah, and like what I was going to say before there, like, it's... what is the primary universe? It's like their primary universe is that subjective universe that his family is existing in, right?
Yeah.
It's like this brings up the question to me of like, because this is almost like Stranger Things, where it's like literally like black and white. There's 2 universes. You're given an upside down and the other side of it, right? Where
I don't
it's
know
like
if they're that black and white with this, though.
well, maybe not quite so much, but it begs the question because like when I think of interdimensionality and things like that, we've talked about this before with like the layers, where it's almost like an infinite, like the pages of the book.
Exactly.
So it's not necessarily about correcting having one primary one primary universe where things are happening in one way that way, and it has to stay that way in that universe because it will have a ripple effect in all the other ones. Right, we're presented with like it's a little bit more simplistic here, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
Like we're not,
it's not like an Inception where it's like there's multiple folds in on itself kind of thing, so to speak, you know? Where...
Like, this doesn't explain, for example, like, things like when we're talking interdimensionality and, like, monsters and, like, where things come from. Like, we harken back to Skinwalker Ranch and, like, things are coming out of a portal. And, like, okay, like, what world is that coming from? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
What world is Donnie walking into when he's sleepwalking and dreaming if we believe that you can cross that ethereal plane when you are asleep?
I would say that it's not black and white. It's not either or, one or the other. But the way I see it, almost like the replication of cells, where because of this one action occurring, there was a duplication of sorts, and so there's this again like a folding out of the picture book or something, where you've created this thing, and then you're simultaneously existing in that.
Right.
But you need to do something within that world to correct what's going on in your actual primary universe, which isn't to say that there's just the one. Well, I feel like we're getting really, really, like, into this, but, like, you know, I don't even know where I'm going with this now. It's just the idea that even though there is that primary, doesn't mean that there's a secondary, tertiary, quaternary, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
know, like, there could be a tertiary reality where it's, like, basically the same, but everyone has blue skin or something, or whatever. You know what I mean?
No, and that's what I'm saying, though.
Totally.
That's like that doesn't seem to match up with the idea of there being like this. What is he called again?
The predetermined
like
God's channel.
Yeah, right. Because if because there would have to be like the same butterfly effect through all these dimensions if you believe in. Like I'm pretty sure that's what Stephen Hawking gets into in that book. Like he talks about a whole bunch of different things, but that was one of the aspects of dealing with time travel is that. It's not just not time travel, but interdimensionality. That it is like described as multiple layers is one version of the
multiple layers, or even like I like to think of it as like bubbles.
Or that too, yeah.
So it's it's like you get this big coagulation of foam on the top of your coffee, and each one of those bubbles that's in that foam represents a different universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where they're all rubbing up against each other, and there's like multiple bubbles like all coexisting around each other simultaneously, and then there's ones that are way further away.
And that's like when Donnie has the knife and he's in the bathroom and he's trying to break through that plane, right? He's banging on the glass, except it's like the bubble. It's like the like it's reflecting back at him and jiggling around because it's this weird barrier into another
that there's somehow
aspect of time. But that's another thing I want to get into in a second too. It's like there's clearly an omnipotent energy here. There's like a god or something.
That's what they're definitely trying to convey, I think, for sure.
Right.
And the way that he's trying to, uncover that slowly, right? Like how he says, the God's channel and everything, right? You're definitely right. You're on the right track there. I think there's, I think that's just one way of looking at it. And I think if we had I tried to get onto that DonnieDarko.org. Okay. It's like this really weird sort of cryptic website.
Yeah.
My Flash player is out of date, so I couldn't actually access it. But essentially on that website, there's a lot of resources that kind of go in further into that and the whole gram of death and the philosophy of time travel.
Right, okay.
And unfortunately, for this particular conversation, that's kind of as far as I can go.
That's okay.
But if I do end up updating my Flash player, if anyone else has an updated Flash player and they want to just contribute on the forum and we can get this conversation going.
I mean, we don't want these film episodes to be super duper long anyway. They're more just kind of a fun discussion. We're not going crazy in
Okay, so speaking of fun discussions, I wanted to get into the characters.
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
I wanted to discuss a few of the... Well, I just wanted to ask you, who do you think did it best? Who did best in this film? Who was the most entertaining? Who was the most effective?
I think the most entertaining was definitely Kitty Farmer, played by, I think we have it down here somewhere.
Yeah, something Grant. Beth Grant.
Because she is just, oh my god, the quintessential, like, nails on a chalkboard / like, you just want to hit her over the head with a golf club. Mm-hmm. But she's so hilarious, just so cringy, conservative, and everyone in the world has met that person. It's been your friend's mom or a teacher at the school you were at. Oh man, like priceless.
Guidance counselor.
Priceless. Yeah, it's like a Mr. Franz type character for sure.
You know what I always think about now, because I've indulged in a few seasons of oh my gosh, it's slipping. Mindy Project.
Yeah.
And her character on the Mindy Project is priceless. It is so depraved and so opposite to what she represents on this particular film.
Yeah.
And I almost cry. I laugh so hard. Yeah. She just makes me just like my heart melt. But I really thought she did a really good job too. That one scene with the PTA meeting when she makes that comment where she you get Rose Darko, who's just like scathing, just giving her just the dirtiest look, like you are just such an idiot. Yeah. And then she just says like, do you even know who Graham Greene is? And then Kitty's like, I think we have all seen Bonanza. And then she sits down all proud and someone gives her a little pat on the shoulder. You can't even see their face. But right. And then it's just like, she just is complete buffoon. Yeah. Graham Greene, the author, is not Graham Greene, the actor. But
or Lauren Greene or whoever the heck it was.
It's someone else. But there is a Graham Greene too, and he did a great job on Red Green.
Yeah. Is that what his name is? Oh.
Graham Greene is his name.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Anyway, we love that show.
Yeah.
Winston Rothschild, Sewage and Septic Sucking Services.
No, that wasn't his character.
No. I'm just saying, that's my favorite part of the show.
Oh, okay.
As long as we're talking about favorite aspects of things here. Yeah, no, Kitty Farmer, she was priceless. But if I honestly had to pick, the star of the show is obviously Donnie, and Jake Gyllenhaal, over the years, he's really developed into one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
I loved him in Jarhead, lots of movies. He's really great. But yeah, this character as a starting role, like an earlier role in your career, was really, really cool, really well done. And the scene, that first scene when he walks out sleepwalking and sees Frank across from his front yard, that's just so eerie, and I love that part. He kind of cocks his head to the side. He has that kind of creepy little childish smile on his face when he's told the world's going to end, and he just says, why? And that's it, and then it just cuts to the next scene.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, and like he even like I read into it more, like they were given a lot of freedom with their characters, and Jake Gyllenhaal, he chose to revert to a little bit more of a vulnerable childlike state when he is in those sort of communications with Frank, which I think is quite natural. And then he also does it again. We see a parallel when he's sitting down with Dr. Thurman and she puts him under. And then that was quite an awkward scene there.
Yeah, putting the hand in the pants and
that was interesting too, the way that she's trying to direct him, but he's fighting it.
Yeah.
Like he has this, I don't even know, like what, do you have anything to comment on that scene? Or?
Well, the first time I saw the movie, right, like I thought that he was almost like faking it. Like he wasn't actually hypnotized and he was just like being a dick. You know what I mean? Like being like, just kind of like being whatever, just the way he was in the assembly with Jim Cunningham and stuff like that, being really sarcastic because he was being just fed up with how he's feeling.
He's the Antichrist.
But obviously, oh man, okay, just to jump to that really quick, like that's probably my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes actually in the whole movie, in terms of an actual scene.
Yeah.
Just stands up and just tears him a new asshole, which is just awesome.
It's great.
Yeah, and then of course everyone gives him a standing ovation.
And then Jim Cunningham's like, this is a child living in fear. But then what I thought was so ironic, like he has this whole false binary philosophy on life.
Yeah.
And then what you see in the very end scene, right, is him sobbing.
Yeah.
And it's because he is living in a constant state of fear.
Yeah.
Just the beautiful irony of that is just
Yeah.
because he's constant fear of getting exposed
Right,
for his...
and possibly just self-loathing too, because
Of course.
you're just horrible.
Anyone who has a self-portrait of themselves that's like a life-size in your friggin' like living room, you have some problems.
You got
with
some
yourself.
serious problems.
Like,
yeah,
I don't even know what to
Yeah.
say to that.
The last normal person to have a portrait of themselves in their house was like the Duke of Richmond or something, like way back in the day. Okay, like when
Duke
it
of
was normal
Richmond.
to like have a portrait of yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, the only reason I brought that up is because we just watched Taboo and the Duke of Richmond gets stabbed in the face. So anyway,
What?
yeah,
Does he?
Lorna Bowe stabs him in the face.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We are
okay.
totally covering that too for this Film Friday. It's not a film, but we recommend you guys go check out the TV series Taboo because we'll definitely be covering it.
One other character that I thought was quite interesting in this film, and I see her as a savant of some kind, and that would be Sharita. Because she sees things. She's always there when there's very interesting telling things. Like, and especially I love the one scene where Drew Barrymore gets fired. And she goes out and she just yells. She's like, fuck! Like, so loud.
Yeah.
And then she just looks, and then there's Sharita just looking at her
just
and just
chilling.
does it. She's like, has her sandwich. Like,
Yeah.
but she sees a lot. And then she has that one instance with Donnie where he takes off her earmuffs and says, everything is going to be okay for you one day.
Yeah.
And she just gets so weirded out. And so, like,
Shut
I don't
up.
even... Yeah, shut up. She's always saying that.
Yeah.
But she just, like, I don't know. I find her to be a very interesting... Because she's not necessary, right? So what is her function is kind of my question.
I think her function is to pose that question. What is her function? And that there's...
Well, just even to be like the she's almost like the fly on the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
No one asks Sharita what she thinks. No one, we don't get anything from her. She's just there to witness it.
But and
you see her in the very end,
we're given
too.
that, we know that she's important though, because when that scene, like you just said, when Donnie takes her earmuffs off and she drops her book, and it's either she just has a huge crush on him and she's written his name on her book or whatever, or she's kind of in tune. She's meant to be in the places she is throughout the film.
Yeah.
Right? She's meant to be getting picked on by Seth Rogen and the other guy and all these things.
Yeah, and even his friends, right? His two friends make fun of her quite a bit when they're at the bus stop and all that. And how she's just kind of this outsider, always kind of peering in. I thought she was quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Another one of my favorites would have to be Eddie Darko.
Oh, the dad. Classic. He is so classic.
So good.
He reminds me of my dad a little bit, like, for some things. Like, priceless. Like, when they're in the little, in the principal's office or whatever, and he just can't help but laugh when he's like, I'll tell you what he said. He told me to
forcibly insert this exercise into my anus.
Come on, you're teeing it up for everybody to laugh when you say something like that.
He just tries to turn it into a cough.
Yeah. Like, oh my god. Yeah, dude. Yeah.
And then even when he exits the principal's office, he's just fucking laughing. Oh, so funny.
Yeah, pretty good.
Oh man. Well, okay. What else do we have to discuss here? I wanted to go through we've covered a lot of my favorite scenes. The dinner table scene at the very beginning, that's very interesting. It's a very pivotal sort of like establishing of characters kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One person we haven't really discussed too much is Maggie Gyllenhaal's character, Elizabeth Darko, and how her role is it is sort of muted, but she's very important, right? Because she is the girlfriend of Frank. Ultimately, she's kind of the reason why he ends up going out to get more booze, I think, and then that's when they end up running over Gretchen, and then that's when the whole instance where he gets shot and all this stuff. But her character in general, like, she's very representative of this new world way of thinking, this liberal mindset that is juxtaposed by the old of Middlesex, like the kiddie farmers, like the people that wouldn't vote for Dukakis, like the Reagan era, whatever, including her dad, which her dad is very interesting because he toes the line between both. Yeah. He associates and he identifies with a lot of what his son does and what his generation is doing, and he can laugh at it and be a part of it, but then at the same time, he won't go for Dukakis when he's going to the election polls. Right. So that's kind of interesting too, but as far as, like, Elizabeth goes, like, what's your take on her?
I mean, yeah, she's, like you said, she's a pretty muted character. I feel like the juxtaposition, or the contrast of, like, the not old world, but conservative liberal values that they're presenting. Do you think that that's to try to contrast, like, I don't even know how to phrase this, like, the belief in time travel or not, almost? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where it's like we have a paranormal element of this, and then the side of it trying to diagnose Donnie as schizophrenic or something like that.
That's actually interesting.
Like, because I'm trying to find a reason why there is, like, this political element, because the movie is not political. It is not a political film. They're not trying to make a political statement per se.
No. It's funny you say that, though, because politics, like, it was very poorly received when it was first released because it was 2001. It was right after 9/11 happened, so any sort of visualization of a plane crashing into a building was terrible. No one wanted to touch it. Like, the only reason Newmarket picked it up was because they had just done Memento, and they thought they could get an audience as far as, like, the time travel part. But it literally, the same guy, what's his name, that directed it, Richard Kelly. He said that basically at Sundance, he had people, like, literally, like, backing out of the room as soon as they saw any imagery of the plane crash. And then the second thing that turned people off was the image of Donnie holding a gun, because Columbine had just happened, like, in the 90s.
Jeez Louise.
So there was a lot of things that kind of were negative and could be perceived as political, but they weren't using it in those ways, I don't think, in the film. Like, that wasn't the function of it. No. But you're right, though. Like, that is kind of interesting, the idea that... Yeah, that could actually really... Because there's this framework of thinking that's very staunch, realist, old world, you could say, equated with that. Right. And then there's this sort of more ethereal, imaginative, progressive type of mentality that maybe Donnie embodies and Grandma Death embodies, ironically, because she's so old, right? And all these ideas and philosophies of time travel and endless sort of possibilities in that regard.
Well, there always has to be a figure like a Grandma Death, where it's like there have always been these people who have believed in this or studied
like
this or
Teslas
whatever.
Of the world,
exactly, and they're left as the markers for the people, the future, like the Donnies, to
pick up on,
to have a tangible thing to look back on, to reference. This crazy woman standing in the middle of the road checking the mailbox every single day that whispers strange things in your ear when you...
Every living creature dies alone. That's an interesting statement. That's an interesting thing to even just ponder over.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Kind of depressing, but...
And this was the light movie we picked.
It has a sad ending, but it's like, Donnie's happy. in the end, right?
He accepts it.
He accepts it, and I think it was also just because he was obviously tormented by it. It was a release for him.
And he finds meaning in the fact that his death means that Gretchen will live.
Right.
If Gretchen hadn't been a part of that tangent universe, then he wouldn't have felt the way he felt, and he wouldn't have done the things that he did.
Yeah.
It's because of love. Love conquers all.
Right.
That's a very interesting theme. I like that.
It is. And he's a noble character. He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, ultimately, I mean, are we coming down to the end here?
I think
Any
so.
final thoughts? I definitely recommend it, that's for sure. I mean, one of our favorite movies.
It really is. It's just classic, and even though it didn't make up, I think it made up less than a fifth of its budget in the first year, but it is definitely made up in leaps and bounds in the decades after. It was actually re-released in 2017 at theaters. And
was it?
Yeah, I think it made, I can't remember, I think it was like maybe 16, 17 million in theaters at the box office again. So
yeah, well, it's a cult classic, awesome movie. There's so much more to unpack, obviously, but we don't want to just keep this dragging on for forever.
Jump on the forum. If you have anything that you really like that we didn't touch on, or that you have your own take on that we did touch on, please just we'll set up a little chat in the forum and get that going. And
definitely.
Anyone who wants to jump in, feel free.
Yeah, because I can picture some very serious time travel discussions.
Oh, definitely,
coming our way. So feel free to get that started, whoever's listening. And do we know what we're doing next week? We've had some great submissions.
Well, we're still kind of trying to finalize. There was a few really cool suggestions.
Okay.
Like there was that one, The Void.
The Void. Yeah.
Looks really cool.
The Descent, which you don't want to watch because it scares the crap out of you.
The Ruins, that would be a cool one to do.
The Ruins could be neat too.
There's a few more. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
So those are 3 potentials that are coming at you next week, but we'll let you guys know so you have a chance to go and watch them, so you can
we'll
join
put up a poll on our Facebook group.
Yeah, see what you guys are into.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this latest Film Friday. Hit us up, intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com, or if you want to interact live, come hit us up on Facebook on the forum, or on Twitter @intotheportal1, and on Instagram @intotheportalpodcast. And as always, we will see you in a couple of days.